Stock your shelves with emergency meals that will save the day in any emergency. Hey guys, it's Jera with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Today I'm putting together another emergency meal kit, otherwise known as a meal in a bag. And they're called this because everything is shelf stable and contained in one bag, and with the contents of that one bag, you can make a complete meal. This is why they are so perfect for emergencies. If you don't have power and you don't have light and you can't get to the store, all you have to do is grab one bag and you can get a real meal put together for your family without having to rummage around in dark cupboards, gathering ingredients, or opening up your fridge and letting out that precious cold air. But they're also good for many other purposes, such as camping trips, traveling, or even just nights that you need a quick and easy meal at home during a non-emergency time. They're also great for blessing others. This meal I'm making today is creamy beef and shells. This is so yummy and homey. I discovered this recipe in a video on Facebook, I think, and we loved it so much. And I realized it would be pretty easy to convert it into a meal in a bag. It's originally made for the crock pot. It's a crock pot meal, but I'm going to do it as a stovetop meal using my butane emergency stove. However, if you're using this in the absence of a power outage, you could use a crock pot. I've definitely had requests for meals that can be done in a crock pot because meals like this can also be really good for college students and others who may not have a full kitchen to work with. All right, let's go ahead and get started on putting this meal together. So these are the ingredients I'm using for this meal. I've got a can of Keystone ground beef. This is the larger can, the 28-ounce can. I've got a can of beef broth. This is the regular size can, 14.5 ounces. Tomato sauce. This is a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. I have some freeze-dried cheddar cheese here. Now what I did was this is a 3/4 pint jar, and I just put 1 cup of cheese in here, and it doesn't fill it up all the way. I did that on purpose. I could have used a 1/2 pint jar, but I want to have a little bit of room to tumble the cheese after I add a little bit of water to refresh this and turn it back into fresh cheese. And then right here, I've got a jar of pasta. This is the medium shell pasta. You need about 2 cups, so I just filled this jar as full as I could get it. This is a pint jar. Now, if you wanted to, you could add oxygen absorbers into these 2 jars if you wanted to make sure that they had really long-term storage. I know that I'm fixing this meal today to show you guys how it comes out, so I'm not adding them today. And we usually rotate through these meals within about a year or so, and in that case, they really wouldn't need them. But you could add them if you wanted to make sure this would last even longer, because all of these ingredients are very long shelf life ingredients. So this is one meal that could sit on your shelf longer if you needed it to or wanted it to. Next, I've got some seasonings. I put them all in this little Mylar pouch. I added a teaspoon of Cajun seasoning, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and a tablespoon of freeze-dried minced garlic. The recipe also calls for minced onion or chopped onion, so if you wanted to, you could also add some chopped, freeze-dried, or dehydrated onion to this package if you wanted to. I didn't really feel the need for that, but we didn't want to miss out on the garlic. And then here I've got a can of media crema. This is 7.6 ounces. This is the size can that they sell. I love this. This is a very versatile ingredient for your prepper pantry. This is a must-have for me. It's basically like a light cream sort of in a can. And usually you can find this in the store in the Hispanic food section. And then the last thing I've got here is a small bottle of water. This is just an 8-ounce bottle. I only am using water in this recipe to refresh the cheese. And I only need about 3 tablespoons for a cup of cheese. It takes surprisingly little water to refresh this cheese into fresh, but it does melt and blend better with the dish if it's refreshed first. So I've got an 8-ounce bottle of water here. I won't even need to use it all, but somebody can drink it. But I do like to include the water when I do meals in a bag like this if it needs water for the recipe, because you don't want to be kind of having to tap into your precious drinking water reserves. And if you wanted, you could also throw in a can of fruit and or vegetable to serve alongside as a side dish. My kids love canned pears, so this is something that I might throw in there. All right, let's go ahead and get this into a bag, and then we'll fix up the meal and I can show you how it turns out. All right, so let's get this bag put together. I'm gonna first add the ground beef. I'm gonna add the jar of pasta, can of tomato sauce, can of beef broth. I'm adding my freeze-dried cheddar cheese, my can of media crema, my packet of seasonings, and the little bottle of water. Now my bag is all ready to go on the shelf. I put a label on this short end so that I can stand it up like a book on the shelf and I can read what's in it. And then on one of the wider sides, I have the pocket. That's actually a CD pocket. It's self-adhesive, and this is where I can slide a recipe card. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my cheese refreshing so that that can be getting ready while I start to cook everything else, because this is going to go in near the end. So I'm just going to measure out about it's actually 3.5 tablespoons for a cup of cheese. So I'm going to start with 3 tablespoons. If I feel like I need more, I'll add more. I'm just going to pour that in. Might not add all of it right off. Put the lid back on, and I'm just going to tumble it around a little bit, shake it. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of it. Just give it a little bit of a tumble. I think I am going to add that last 1/2 tablespoon. And I'm just going to let this set while I get the rest of the dish ready. Now, if you have electricity, you can put this in the fridge while it sets, but you don't need to. You can let it set out at room temperature. You could tumble it every few minutes if you think of it. For preparing this meal, I'm going to use my butane burner. I recommend everyone really to have one of these for emergency cooking. These are considered safe for indoor use. It might have warnings otherwise depending on what brand you get, but they're generally considered safe and used indoors. That being said, anytime you're using any of your emergency equipment and your alternate fuels, please, please, please have a battery operated carbon monoxide detector nearby. I keep an extra one with a digital readout in our emergency gear so that we have it to use when we're doing anything like this. Another thing to make sure you always have with your emergency gear, obviously, is a manual can opener. We keep extras in our emergency cooking kit. We always have them in the kitchen because it's what I typically use. If you're not certain you'll have a manual can opener, I will sometimes throw a little P38 into the bag with the meal. I'm going to start by adding my ground beef. So I'm going to go ahead and open this can. I'm not going to drain it. You can remove the fat from the top of the can if you want to, and leave the broth right in there because we're going to use that as part of our recipe. I really like Keystone ground beef. It's actually really good. I like it better than my home canned. I think the texture comes out better. I usually buy this off of Walmart or off of Amazon, just depending on the price. You have to watch the seller and know your prices so that you know you're not getting ripped off, because there's always going to be jacked up prices. But you can also order it right off of Keystone's website. So I'm just going to empty this whole can right into my pot. Like I mentioned, I'm adding it broth and all, and you could remove this fat if you wanted. That's up to you. You could remove some of it, all of it. It's really no different than if you used a little bit of oil or butter to saute your onion and garlic in when you were starting your recipe. But it is a good amount of fat, so I might take out this big chunk. However, also keep in mind, if you were in an emergency and you were eating from your food storage, you would probably want to get as much calories as you could from your food. So that would be a good time to leave that in and make this a little bit more calorically dense. All right, so we've got the ground beef in. This will break up as we heat it. This is fully cooked, being in the can, being canned like that. It looks a little bit pinkish color. That's just the way it is. It's fully cooked. Next, I'm going to add my beef broth. And I'm going to add my tomato sauce. And I am also going to add my seasonings at this point. All right, so I'm just going to get the heat on. We're going to get this on high because we just want to bring this up to a good boil. And I'm going to mix it as it heats. Now, like I mentioned, this is originally a crock pot dish. So if you're making this in the crock pot, you would put all of these ingredients first. And it says cook them on high for 3 hours. As long as they get really hot, it could be shorter than 3 hours, I'm sure. You basically just want to get everything all hot and bubbling before you add the pasta and the cream and cheese at the very end. And then if you're doing it in the crock pot, once you add the final ingredients, the pasta, the cream, and the cheese, then it just goes an extra 30 minutes until the pasta's done. It also calls for seasoning with salt and pepper. I find that it doesn't really need much salt and pepper because of the broth and all of the other seasonings. But if you wanted to, you could add some salt and pepper into your seasoning bag, or you could also throw in little salt and pepper packets so that people could salt and pepper their own when it's finished. Just break up all the chunks of ground beef against the side of the pan if they need a little help as this is heating. All right, this is starting to bubble, so this is going to be a good time to add in the remaining ingredients. So I'm going to start with the pasta. Stir that in well so nothing sticks together. And next I'm going to add the media crema. I was supposed to shake that well before opening, but I forgot. I'm going to turn this down just a hair. I'm actually going to turn it way down just while I get all this, all the rest of the ingredients stirred in. And next I'm going to go ahead and add this cheddar cheese that we refreshed. Get that stirred in so it can start melting. Now, if you don't have freeze-dried shredded cheese, you could probably try using some Velveeta. I know Velveeta has the fresh packs. They're called fresh packs. It comes with 5 little blocks, and it's little 4-ounce blocks that are individually wrapped. So I like to use those in a lot of my meals and bags because you can get just the right amount. So maybe 2 of those 4-ounce cubes might be a good substitute. But really, if you don't have freeze-dried shredded cheese, I recommend getting some if you can, because it's really an awesome thing to have in your preps because it's real cheese. It's not the fake stuff like Velveeta. It's not processed and chemicalized. So I really recommend getting yourself some real freeze-dried shredded cheese for your Prepper Pantry. All right, so now that everything is all stirred in here, I'm going to go ahead and bring this just to a simmer. I'm going to put a lid on it and let it cook until the pasta is all cooked and absorbed. And this does start off looking pretty saucy, but as it sits a little bit longer, then it ends up being just about perfect. But you probably could get away with putting a little more pasta in it if you wanted to. Just use a slightly bigger jar. You could also, instead of putting your pasta and your cheese in jars, if you wanted, you could throw them into smaller Mylar bags, just like with the seasonings. All right, so I'm going to throw a lid on this for about 15 minutes. In the crock pot, it's 30 minutes, but I think where we have it simmering on the burner, it's probably going to go quicker than that. Okay, it's been cooking for 15 minutes. And the pasta is pretty soft, but as you can see, it's still pretty saucy. But it usually ends up pretty saucy at first, and then when it sets, it kind of thickens up. But I am going to let this go another 5 minutes or so on a low simmer, just because if it's in the crock pot, it's going for 30 minutes. So, and this pasta is not overly soft, so I'm going to go ahead and let that go a little bit longer. All right, so this has been cooking for 20 minutes on a low simmer. And you can see it still looks pretty saucy, but I always think it's too saucy. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off and let it set for 5 or 10 minutes because it's really hot right now and it is going to thicken up. But I do think if you had more people to feed, you could probably get away with adding an extra ½ a cup of pasta or so to this recipe. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let this set, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. So you can see this does thicken up nicely as it sets. I did let this set for at least about 20 minutes, and now it's ready to serve. All right, let's give it a try. That is so good. I hope you and your family enjoy this meal as much as my family does. And I hope this meal in a bag concept can make a difficult time just a little bit easier for you. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a shell emoji down in the comments and check out this playlist for even more emergency meal ideas. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.